Hello, everyone. Welcome to Barbara Lane's Book Friends. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm Stephanie Wiseman, Artistic Director and founder of The Marsh and Marsh Stream. We're so thrilled to have this show tonight. But let me tell you about the other shows, and we'll get to this show. So, tomorrow night is Wednesday. We have Solo Arts Heal. This is Bob Rader. He's doing a solo performance and talk and Q&A called Smoker, about the addiction to smoking and getting beyond it. So we're really thrilled about that. It's a fun show. It's gone all over the world, and it'll be great to have a conversation with him. On Thursday night, it's my Marsh Stream. And this week we're having Irma Herrera's as my guest. And thrilled about that. She did a performance called Why Would I Mispronounce My Own Name? So it's a very timely and wonderful piece. On Friday, if you haven't done it yet, it's Bingo with Josh Kornbluth. And let me tell you, I'm sure this is the most iconic, unique, funny, weird bingo in the entire world. It's Marsh Bingo. Marsh Bingo with Josh Kornbluth. And on Saturday, we have David Harada's solo performance spotlight, and he's doing an excerpt from his piece, Box Without a Bottom, which is a wonderful magic show about Japanese culture and everything. So come see that. But tonight, we're here for Barbara's Book Friends, and we have wonderful guests. Peter Stein. Hi, Peter. Susan Harlow. Hi, Susan. So glad to have these theatrical and media people on the show tonight. Also, if you would like to make a donation to the Marsh, we would appreciate it. No ticket sales, 70% of our income gone, and Lord knows for how long. So any tip to our tip jar is appreciated. You can also become a member because we are developing the performance broadcast platform membership program. Think of us as a KQED, probably not. PBS, probably not, but we're gonna be what we're gonna be. Okay, so now let me introduce you to my dear friend, wonderful producer, fabulous Barbara Lane. Thank you, Barbara. Good to see you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And hello, Martians. And I must say, Stephanie, you look fetching tonight. Just absolutely fetching.
It was
and
for
what
you.
a great idea to make a donation to the Marsh. Stephanie has come up with this amazing schedule of programming. She pivoted, which is the word we use way too much these days, so quickly when the theater closed. So the Marsh really deserves your support. I've been a Marshian since the get-go. In fact, helped contribute a coffee pot to the very first Marsh. So I'm delighted to be here tonight, delighted to have all of you with us, and we're going to get started. Our topic tonight is one of my favorites. You know I love to read. That's established, but I love talking about books that have been made into fabulous movies, books that have been made into not so good movies, what books should be made into movies, and plays as well, and all kinds of theatrical expressions, because when you're reading some books, you just think, oh my God, that is so fabulous. I can just see it, and you want to see it. So we're going to talk to two people who understand that as well as anyone I know. The first is Susan Harlow. Thanks for being here tonight, Susan. And Susan is co-founder and co-executive director of Word for Word. I suspect if you're tuned in tonight, you already know Word for Word. I've been a fan for a long, long time. Word for Word does theatrical productions of short stories, word for word, meaning he said, she said, everything you would read in the actual story. And it's an incredible art form, a really original art form. So we're going to talk to Susan about that, and books and performing arts and all of that good stuff. And also with us tonight, we have Peter Stein. Peter, I've known Peter for this is over 30 years. We were television producers together at KPIX way back when. He's been a part, we actually started a book club 35 years ago. Peter's a documentary filmmaker. He was former executive director of the Jewish Film Festival. He's a senior programmer at Frameline, and he himself is a performer extraordinaire. So we've got a great cast tonight, and I'm delighted to have all of you Martians with us as well. So Susan, let's start with you. I'm curious about the genesis of Word for Word and why the whole story.
Right. Well, I need to give a lot of credit to Joanne Winter, who is with me, co-founder and co-artistic director of Word for Word. And it all started, I was living in Seattle. I'm from the Bay Area, but I had been living in Seattle and involved with a company that performed short stories verbatim. And I discovered this form up there. And additionally, I was at that time a public librarian as well as an actor. And so this was just, anything I could possibly dream of. My loves were being married into Word for Word. And Joanne and I were friends at the time. She came up to Seattle to see what I was doing. She helped me move up and she helped me move back. I was really homesick for the Bay Area. And she and I decided we would start this company, Word for Word, and that we would do the same thing that was being done with a company in Seattle, which was perform short stories in their entirety. And I think we were really interested in trying something that seemed to stretch theatrical convention a little bit. And also, quite frankly, we were looking for work for ourselves because, at that time, especially, we've been in existence now 27 years. So a lot has changed, but then, it was harder for women to find roles. And any Shakespeare play has, maybe 4 women. A lot has changed since then. There's been a great movement with women in the arts. But so Joanne and I decided we would start this company. And at the same time, Z Space was beginning. And the idea was to create new work where you could do what you wanted to do. And so that's what we set out to do, was to create some work for people to see. We asked anybody who was interested if they'd like to come and join. And we were joined by some really wonderful people who have been with us for now 27 years. We've met every month, and that's something right there. But we started, the very first short story that we did was The Standard of Living by Dorothy Parker. And it was with Joanne and I as 2 New York shop girls who have a dream. What would they do if they had $1 million? And then their dreams are dashed when they realize how expensive everything is. But it was directed by Amy Freed and with John Balma. And, Dorothy Parker is such a satirist. It was a pleasure to do that. That was the beginning.
Well, you say Dorothy Parker, and of course I'm hooked immediately. I neglected to say that Susan also has originated many of the roles for Word, and so of course she's an actress as well. Susan, what kind of stories do best for Word? And tell us about the selection process.
Right. Well, that is the $64 million question. What does best? Because it's not always what you'd think. Believe me, I've gone down wrong roads myself. I remember one of our core members, Stephanie Hunt, brought us Tobias Wolff's Bullet in the Brain, which was published in the New Yorker. And my first thought was, I said, we can't do that. It's about a man getting shot in the head. And, yeah. But he is a brilliant writer. And that was the beginning of a long relationship with Tobias Wolff. We've done 7 of his stories now to date. At one time I thought, well, why don't we try Ulysses? And I know. And there is no punctuation there. And we were like punctuation hounds. It depends. You'd think it might be stories that have a lot of dialogue, but really, I think the tale is in what you do with the narrative. That's what makes it so exciting. And we have found a way that where we have these reading meetings and we read the story out loud to each other, and you can hear when you're reading it, you can hear whether it's going to work or not. And it's great to take on a challenge, you know. The main thing that we want is a good story that has some, for me, some depth and some, you know, your heart wants to be moved and you want to be able to laugh and you want to be able to cry and come away with it with some kind of empathy and compassion, I think. And to me, we're all great readers. We love to read. And that's sort of the two things can come together. I'd also say we're right in the interspace between the book and the film, because a film is rarely, I don't know, Peter, maybe you can speak to this, but rarely takes the entire text and performs it. But we are literal. And it's a difference. And we have had writers comment on that, on the difference between seeing the work in film and seeing what it is that we do. So
I laughed, and I saw Peter laugh when you said Ulysses, because that almost killed our book club. But I'm going to get to Peter in a moment. But
Great.
just one other question before we move
Mhm.
on. By and large, have author reactions all been positive?
They have. And, you know, that is the most terrifying thing, Barbara, when you're in the audience with the writer right there. I mean, if I'm not on the stage, I'm watching the writer and you're watching him to see, does she or he, are they going to like it? Are we honoring their voice? Because there's an infinite number of ways to interpret, you know, what they have written. And it's, it's heart pounding, but we've been very, very fortunate. And the writers have really appreciated what we have done. We've been so honored to have them at our side in this way. And of course, we always get the rights, et cetera, for it.
Yeah. I'm going to move on, but I have to tell
Yeah.
you, and I'm sure you saw it too. Did you see Gats by the Elevator?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Berkeley rep. So this is The Great Gatsby word for word, and it's a 7-hour performance done by a company out of New York that was at Berkeley rep recently. Blew my mind and really made me aware once again of the brilliance of that language. It was just extraordinary.
You can rest in his words. It's so great. Yeah.
So good. All right. Peter, thank you for being so patient. So your medium, by and large, I mean, you've done some theater, you certainly know a lot about theater, is film. So let's talk about books that do well adapted to film. I know you trot off every year to the Berlin Film Festival, and you're such a jet setter, not anymore. But let's talk about books that adapt well into film. What are your favorites, or what do you want to say about that?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and I'm a huge fan of Word for Word's work as well. I'm glad you talked about that, Susan, about it sort of occupying this space in between the literary or the reader's experience, which is definitely an interior experience in your own head, and a film or play, which is definitely, it's one to many. That is, you're watching something go by you in real time, either as a play or a film. And what Word for Word does is kind of give you that sort of middle step, which is to hear the author's voice, but in a performed manner. And that's rare. And that's usually not what film adaptations or theatrical adaptations are trying to do at all. The point of adapting a novel, usually to make a good film or a play, is to take the bones of a story, a really good narrative with incident, with clearly defined characters, and where the drama is played out in between and among the characters, because that is in fact the core of drama. Novels, for example, where the primary battle is between a character and some abstract idea like faith or God or the devil or whatever, are much, much more difficult to adapt, although it has been done successfully. But the easiest pickings, in a way, for adapters, if you're a playwright or or a screenwriter is to take a story where the characters are already living on the page and often are given dialogue in the book. And oftentimes a successful adaptation will dispense with the authorial voice altogether, which is taken over in a film medium by the point of view of the camera, which is not always omniscient. I mean, the point of view of a camera can be, oh, this is the hero's story because we're basically telling his or her tale through where the camera's placed. But, you know, there are a lot of wonderful adaptations. I can also think of some clunkers. One of the ones that was a surprisingly good adaptation of a book to a film, which was very cleverly done, is, if you have to go back, 30 years ago, to The French Lieutenant's Woman. A beautiful novel with a very clear authorial voice in the novel. And when I first heard it was going to be adapted, first of all, I know some of it is very tragic and takes place during the Holocaust, and some of it is, time shifted to past the war. And that's always good, the double shifting for film, because you can flip through periods and eras very easily, more easily than you can do in a play, I think. But what I wondered is, how are they going to get the introspective voice of the author? And of course, they did that by assigning a narrator character, quite literally in the film. You hear the voiceover of the writer, and that's a clever trick among adapters, I think, is to say, well, we're going to have a voiceover that essentially is a stand-in for the original author's voice. And I think that format has fallen out of favor to some degree. It's just a little bit too obvious when a film starts and you hear a voiceover. You're thinking, wait, who's talking to me? It works occasionally still. Anyway, that's one example. And I think another example of a book that I would not have expected to make a good play is Mark Hatton's A Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night, which, if you've read the book, is this interior experience of a boy on the autism spectrum. And it's very much from his confused and brilliant, but completely, in a way, disconnected point of view, including drawings. And it's just a wonderful physical object of a book, but very much in this boy's head. And when I heard that the National Theater was going to try to do a stage adaptation of it, I thought, well, good luck with that. I mean, there's wonderful incidents that happen in it and a relationship. But of course, the challenge for the adapters was exactly, how do we create the experience of this boy on the spectrum in a three-dimensional time-based space on stage? And it was done with lighting and beautiful set design. And you can see it as a film. If you go onto National Theater Live, they made a kind of one of those HD live experiences of it. And it puts you right in the middle of this boy's point of view, even though it's a time-based play.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we all love to talk about clunkers, but actually, when you were talking about interiority as something that's really hard to capture in a film, I was thinking, of course, of The English Patient, which, love it or hate it, was a surprise for many people who thought, oh, they can never, ever do that. And then I was thinking about The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, which is somebody who's almost completely paralyzed. And so when you have a ingenious filmmaker who sort of takes you beyond the story, the way Clockwork Orange did, for example, you have something new, something that's a new creation. And that's, I think, when it gets really exciting, as opposed to some of the Harry Potter books, which are really cinematic, but some of the directors, and a number of different directors made them, they were done very literally. And it just wasn't, for me, as interesting.
Right. It's a problem, actually, to adapt a really popular book that has a following, because the expectations of the fan base are they want to see the version of the book that played out in their heads while they were reading it. Well, no director is ever going to make that, including you, because there are things that happen in your mind that just cannot be realized on camera. And so it's odd that sometimes less successful or obscure books end up making more memorable films, because people have not already fixed on this particular playing out of characters.
You know what's one I was also thinking of, and maybe Susan, because this was a theater piece that I couldn't imagine how it would be done, and it was brilliant, is Fun Home. I mean, Fun Home was an extraordinary theatrical experience, and it was a graphic novel. Who would have thunk it?
That's graphic novel. Yeah, that's tricky. We've been interested in that too, and it is hard. How do you? You got to really be inventive and design, etc.
Susan, do you have any things that books that short stories that word for word wanted to tackle and it just wasn't going to work no matter how hard you tried?
Well, I think, there are books we want to tackle that we can't tackle because of the platinum age of television. Content is so desirable that we cannot always get the rights. That's been a big problem for us, especially I'd say in the last 5 years or so. The things they carried, we couldn't get the rights to do that. Olive Kitteridge, we fought hard, and we were able to get the rights for 2 stories. It was right at the time that the TV show was being made, but we'd love to do the follow-up Olive again, but we cannot get the rights.
Yeah.
But in terms of some, I'm thinking right now of all the things that were so very difficult that we managed to do. I think, it speaks to your comments about the narrator, Peter. That's one of the most difficult aspects of what we're doing, I think. So if the story's in the first person and you're honoring that first person, but we try to stay away from the idea of narrator because we want to plunge you right into that story, and there is no narrator, or unless it's written as a narrator. So, but how do you keep that person active, really active? And I think Sonny's Blues which I know we're going to see in a bit, is a really great example of how those problems were solved. But it's really hard, and it puts a big burden on whoever is playing that. And also your flow, every time I or me or my is mentioned, it needs to be in the voice of the person playing that. So there's so many theatrical aspects of this as well. I am really racking my brain right now to think about what didn't work.
Well, since you mentioned Sonny's,
yeah,
and it's an extraordinary piece that you created. Brian, can we take a look at Sonny's Blues as performed by Word for Word?
It's a clip of it, yeah.
The clip. Here we go. Whoa.
Bills.
That's
Oh,
exciting.
my goodness.
Brian.
Oh, let's see.
We won't look.
Sorry, give me just a second.
Sure.
That's okay. We're looking forward to seeing it.
Here we go.
Here we go.
I read about it in the paper, and I couldn't believe it. And I read it again. Then perhaps I just stared at the newsprint, spelling out his name, spelling out his story. Stared at it. I was remembering, and it made it hard to catch my breath, that I had been there when he was born. I had heard the first words he had ever spoken. When he started to walk, he walked from our mother straight to me, and I caught him just before he fell when he took the first steps he ever took in this world. How's this go?
One hand, and she started to sing. Tis the old ship of Zion.
And the 2 other sisters
Tis the old
and the brother joined in.
ship of Zion.
Tis the old ship of Zion.
Tis the old
Tis the old ship of Zion. Get on board. Rush, rush. And their heads bumped abruptly against the low ceiling of their actual possibilities. They were filled with rage. All they really knew were 2 darknesses. Darkness. The darkness of their lives, which was now closing in on them. Dark streets downtown. Squeezed through the narrow, jagged the entrance of the big room. Hello, boy, said a voice from behind us. And an enormous black man, much older than Sonny or myself,
erupted out of all that atmospheric lighting and put his arm around Sonny's shoulder. I've been sitting right here.
He said,
waiting for you.
Then I understood at last that he could help us to be free if we would listen. And he would never be free until we did. Yet there was no battle in his face now. I heard what he had gone through and would continue to go through until he came to rest in earth. He had made it his, that long line of which we only knew Mama and Daddy, and he was giving it back, as everything must be given back so that passing through death, it can live forever.
Wow. Wow. Susan, we need some, behind the scenes.
Yes.
Tell us
I-
everything you can tell us about that.
I have chills just watching that little clip,
Yeah.
and well, that's James Baldwin's Sonny's Blues, of course. And I want, first of all, to credit it. It was directed by Margot Hall with Peter Macon, who speaks first, Damon Van, Marguerite Robinson, L. Allison Payne, Robert Hampton, Mujahid Abdul Rashid, and an original score by Marcus Shelby.
Mm.
Right. So it came to me through, again, one of our core company members, and she said, we should do this story. And there's a book called, you've got to read this. And Sonny's Blues was mentioned in it by Kenneth A. McLean, who said reading the story saved his life. It's such a moving story. And so I contacted Margot Hall, who had done a lot of work for us, both as an actor and a director, and said, would you direct this? And she happily took it on. And we got this great team together of actors, only 6 actors to populate this whole story. And one of the big issues was the music, because it's about music. Sonny's Blues is the title, but we couldn't, and ideally you might have live musicians. But I always think that your most creative things happen when you face your biggest obstacles. And so Margot had this great idea that we would hire Marcus Shelby to create an original score. And thus we would not have musicians. We were also planning to take this on tour to Paris, because we've been fortunate to get funding to go there every year. And so the whole live musicians would have been great, but not for a little company like us. And so Marcus created a great score. Margot did an awesome job. And we co-produced this with the Lorraine Hansberry Theater when they were still there on Sutter Street. Mm-hmm. And it was thrilling. It was absolutely a pleasure and a remarkable experience. And, something that we don't know, of course, when we can go back into the theater, but we're talking about podcasts and that kind of thing. And I would love to bring it as a multi-voice podcast with those actors, because it was just such a unique experience. Well, it was a great experience, like performing many short stories is, but James Baldwin especially. And then we went to France with it, and, he died there in the south of France, and he spent so much time there. It really resonated, I think, for the actors as well. And it was just great. It was wonderful.
It's interesting seeing that clip, because the camera is used there. And so you're not getting the same experience that you do when you're watching word for word, because there's certain directorial decisions that are made that sort of change the experience of it, which is
right. We were with that just editing kind of from the back of the house camera and putting it together for a promo clip, Yeah, I mean, when you're there watching, it is really something. I remember we were at the Lorraine Hansberry with this, and the fire alarm went off, which is like, oh my God, what are we during the show? And Peter was just incredible. He was just like, I think we need to leave for a little bit. And then everybody came back. I mean, they were not going to leave and not hear the end of that story, A big challenge, besides the fact of the musicians, another really big challenge was the fact that it is in the first person. So that put a huge burden on Peter. And I was just talking to him the other day, and he said, yeah, the most lines I've ever learned. And it's true, it needed him. And he's such a dynamic presence that he really carried that story through. And everybody in it was just, great.
So you're clearly on hiatus now because you're not doing any live theater. Are you cooking up new stuff? Are you getting things ready? What are you doing?
Well, the mind is always working. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard, isn't it, this time? Because you try to make a plan for the future, but when is the future? When does that happen? You know, we had been in production with Octavio Solis's Retablos, his memoir of growing up along the border. And it was a great show, truly great show. And we were taking it to France.
Mhm.
March 23rd, we were all leaving. And, you know, we lost our last 4 performances. You know, we shut down and we couldn't take the show there. And so I've been trying to think, well, when can we? And it's also unknown. Everything's packed and ready to go. Costumes are clean, actors are willing. I mean, we all want to go. So it's difficult. But yes, we have several things. I mean, we're always planning and thinking about what we can do. We have an off the page series that we had planned that we had stopped because we can't be together. Right now, we are thinking a lot about podcasts
Mhm.
because, you know, we're telling a whole story. So it's kind of a natural for us, but it's just dealing with rights and, you know, getting the author rights and then union contracts, et cetera, et cetera. So
Thank you. Well, Peter, I know that you as a senior programmer at Frameline had to sort of stop everything in its tracks. And I don't want to turn this into a woe is us COVID blues kind of program, but how have you gotten around that?
Well, everyone whose work relies on gathering people into spaces, and that's, you know, theaters, film festivals, concerts, and so forth, we've all had to figure out not only how do we deliver some programming, but what is the appetite for people who are at home? Do they really want to spend more time on their screen? How do you make something
Right.
distinctive that still feels like it has the DNA? Like what we're doing right now, it's like a marsh conversation, but of course everyone's in their home and they're not in those always rather uncomfortable red seats at the marsh. Maybe you're a little bit more comfortable than that. But at Frameline, we're going with a 4-day mini virtual festival at the end of June, offering like 14 or 16 films. And we're putting all the things together that a normal festival would have in terms of Q&As and live special performances, but the films themselves are going to be obviously screened for people in their homes. So it'll be an interesting experiment what appetite people have to actually have appointment TV. Like, do I need to show up at 7 o'clock or can I wait till tomorrow to see it? And we'll see how it goes. But yeah, we're all pivoting to use that
Peter,
word.
I know you've had a lot of experience in TV as well, and you've made several wonderful documentaries. I'm thinking of one about the Castro and one about the Fillmore. And for anybody who loves San Francisco histories, these things are just terrific. Here we have this whole new medium, and we have Netflix, and we have, I just finished watching Normal People, the adaptation for television of Sally Rooney's book, which was absolutely outstanding. It was an Irish production with 2 actors I'd never seen in my whole life who were just powerful. So talk a little bit about that medium and what you've seen, particularly in these multi-part series that has been successful or not.
Yeah, well, I mean, content is king, and or I should use a non-gendered royal. Content is royal, and people who can come up with multi-part series, and you have so many different platforms now, not just the technical platforms, but also you no longer are stuck to the broadcast hour where your film or your story has to be exactly 44 or 46 or 52 minutes. So there's some really there's very, very strong content that gets to explore in the way that 19th century novels did. You have, it used to be HBO that was doing it. Now you've got Amazon Prime and Apple Prime and Apple TV and so forth. You've got really strong writers investigating long form stories with characters that shift over the course of not just of one season, but multiple seasons. I happen not to be a big binge watcher, partly because my work as a film programmer is to be watching on the screen all the time. So I may have to punt on recommending specific long form episodics, but we're showing more of them in film festivals because that's where people are watching. I still think though that the two tent poles of the sort of narrative experience, where it's a story being told, I still feel is live theater and long form film seen with an audience. It happens to be just my.
Oh, Seen with an audience for sure. We just had a question from one of our audience members, where can you see Normal People? And it's Hulu. So, and here's the thing, quite often you can get a 7-day free trial, just saying. So the thing is, you have to remember to cancel it if that's what you're doing. And I'm absolutely dreadful at that. So Peter, we haven't talked yet about clunkers, and being snarky is totally fun and I love it. So what are some adaptations you think that haven't worked and either were a bad idea in the beginning or just badly executed?
Yeah, well, one that comes to mind, although it's a musical, it's probably not fair, but the film adaptation of Les Miserables that Hugh Jackman's logged through. I mean, it's an extraordinary novel. It has made very interesting, if sweeping, both theater and film experiences as a non-musicalized story. But the big problem with the musicalization of the movie, or the movie musical, was its insistence on doing everything in close-up like this. I mean, the whole point of having cinema is that you can have something really big and sweeping, and so you had a budget problem that didn't allow them to have big wide shots, and I mean, how do you make Victor Hugo boring? I happen not to like that as a musical, but man, yeah, that's my clunker, although it was really an adaptation of the musical, not so much the novel. I don't know, maybe you or Susan has one.
Susan, to you?
Well, for a film,
yeah, sure.
A clunker. Oh my God, a clunker. Well, I want to say one that I thought could have been a clunker, but I was really, and maybe Peter, you think it was, but I was really amazed at what he did, which is As I Lay Dying, that James Franco. Have you seen that movie?
I have not. No.
It's described as an unfilmable book, and I think that's why he went to do it. But it's amazing. Joanne, my word for word partner, has written to me to tell me a story that was very difficult for us, but I wouldn't call it a clunker. Was Cannery Row. Oh. We did Steinbeck's Cannery Row, and it was really hard because it had so many locations. That's the thing with film too, right, Peter? You can find so many inventive ways to go from place to place to place, but we're in real time on a stage, and you're watching us, and how do you move from place to place? And that's the thrill and excitement of trying to put a short story on the stage. How do you do that effectively?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We just had Andrea write in and talk about a terrible movie, Bonfire of the Vanities. I don't remember it. It was probably that bad, but I know that book was extremely visual and had a lot of set pieces that you thought would really adapt well to film. So I guess you just never know.
Well, and that's a good example of a film that really suffered for the loss of the authorial voice, because the whole point of reading Tom Wolfe at all is to get those frissons of his sneering, or his take, his attitude, his critique of the society that he's depicting. But Bonfire of the Vanities, the film, was so literal in and because film is such a literal medium, of its depiction of the characters and the drug use and the greed and so forth, that you just ended up wanting to wash yourself afterwards. Like, why are we with these people? Because you didn't get the joy of having the attitude that the authorial voice offers.
So, how about Godfather 1, 2, 3? Because I think Godfather 1, 2 are just, the ultimate in filmmaking.
Than our books.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Yeah, we did something last summer for Litquake for their a fundraiser where they asked us to take a part of the book and perform it in our style, and so we did. But I mean, and so I did a lot of research on it, and he did such a Coppola did such a favor in creating those films. However, part 3 did not come anywhere near the magnificence and the sort of grandeur of those first 2 movies. American epic.
There are certain authors who are adapted over and over again because they're just it works. And one of them, of course, Peter, you know what's coming here.
Yes, we
One of
do.
them, of course, is Charles Dickens. And my friend Peter, many years ago, did a performance from Dickens. And why don't you tell us about it, Peter? Set it up
Sure.
and then go for it.
Yeah, well, when Barbara first proposed that she's talking about sort of adaptation and what books make good films or stories, I immediately flashed on Dickens because he's been a complete favorite for first in the 19th century for theatrical adaptation, and particularly in the first 2/3 of the 20th century for film adaptation, because he creates these stories. He was innately theatrical. He was part of a theater troupe when he was young. He loved performing. He spoke his dialogue, not just his dialogue, he spoke his narration out loud when he was composing. And much of his career in the last 20 years of his life was actually spent going on tour with these extraordinary oratory road shows in which he would read aloud what were really his own theatrical adaptations of his stories. Who, of course, the characters were beloved, so people wanted to really hear him bring to life, when Bill Sikes murders Nancy. And he was such a good actor that women were said to faint in the audience when he would deliver these stories. So many years ago, when I was in college, I entered a speaking contest where you were asked in a sort of word-for-word way to render some piece of literature or a poem or story aloud as a speaking exercise. And I immediately thought about Dickens. And so I actually committed to memory and performed a piece of the second chapter of Hard Times, which, as with so much of Dickens, is it's quite theatrical. He creates a little scene. So in talking about this with Barbara, I maybe foolishly said, I think I can probably dust off the old Signet Classics edition that I had something 38 years ago. And in fact, it's become like muscle memory to me. So Barbara, would you like me to perform this section of Hard Times?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Hard Times is Dickens' satire or critique of many, many English institutions, particularly industrialization. And this scene is set in a schoolroom where we meet Mr. Gradgrind, the schoolmaster, and one of his young pupils, who is the daughter of someone who works in the circus. And it's sort of exactly the opposite of what Word for Word does, which is distribute, or what I've done is the opposite. Instead of distributing all of the wonderful narration and all the characters among many actors, you're going to see just me doing everything. And it is verbatim with some judicious editing. Thomas Gradgrind, sir, a man of realities, a man of facts and calculations, a man who proceeds upon the principle that 2 and 2 are 4 and nothing over. Thomas Gradgrind. The rule and a pair of scales, and the multiplication table always in his pocket, sir, ready to weigh and measure any parcel of human nature and tell you exactly what it comes to. Oh, it is a mere question of figures, a case of simple arithmetic. Oh, you might hope to get some other nonsensical belief into the head of George Gradgrind or John Gradgrind or Augustus Gradgrind, all supposititious, non-existent persons. But into the head of Thomas Gradgrind, no, sir. In such terms, Thomas Gradgrind always mentally introduced himself, whether to his private circle of acquaintance or to the public in general. In such terms, no doubt substituting the word girls and boys for sir, Thomas Gradgrind now presented Thomas Gradgrind to the little pictures before him who were to be filled so full of facts. Girl number 20, said Mr. Gradgrind. I don't know that girl. Who is that girl? Sissy Jupe, sir, returned number 20. Sissy is not a name. Don't call yourself Sissy. Call yourself Cecilia. Its father has called me Sissy, sir. Then he has no business to do so. Tell him he mustn't. Cecilia Jupe, let me see. What is your father? He belongs to the horse riding, if you please, sir. We don't want to know anything about that here. Give me your definition of a horse. Sissy Jupe thrown into the greatest alarm by this demand. Girl number 20, unable to define a horse, said Mr. Gradgrind for the general behoof of all the little pictures. Girl number 20, possessed of no facts in reference to one of the commonest of animals. Some boy's definition of a horse. Bitzer, yours. Quadruped, graminivorous, 40 teeth, namely 24 grinders, 4 eye teeth, 12 incisors, sheds coat in the spring, in marshy countries sheds hoofs too, hoofs hard but requiring to be shod with iron, age known by marks in mouth, thus and much more, Bitzer. Now, girl number 20, said Mr. Gradgrind, you know what a horse is. Another gentleman now stepped forth. Very well, that's a horse. Now, let me ask you, girls and boys, would you paper a room with representations of horses? After a pause, one half of the children cried out in chorus, yes, sir, upon which the other half, seeing in the gentleman's face that yes was wrong, cried out, no, sir, as the custom is in these examinations. Of course, no. Why wouldn't you? A pause. One corpulent, slow boy with a wheezy manner of breathing ventured the answer, because he wouldn't paper a room at all, but would paint it. You must paper it, said the gentleman. You must paper it, said Mr. Gradgrind, whether you like it or not. Don't tell us you wouldn't paper it. What do you mean, boy? I'll tell you, then, said the gentleman, after another and a dismal pause, why you would not paper a room with representations of horses. Do you ever see horses walking up and down the sides of rooms in reality? In fact, do you? Yes, sir, cried one half. No, sir, cried the other. Of course, no. Why then, you are not to see anywhere what you don't see in fact. You are not to have anywhere what you don't have in fact. What is called taste is merely another name for fact. This is a new principle, a discovery, a great discovery. Now, let me try you again. Suppose you are going to carpet a room. Would you use a carpet having a representation of flowers upon it? There being a general conviction by this time that no, sir, was always the correct answer to this gentleman, the chorus of no was very strong. Only a few feeble stragglers said yes, among them Sissy Jupe. Girl number 20. The girl blushed and stood up. So you would carpet your room, or your husband's room if you were a grown woman and had a husband, with representations of flowers, would you? Why would you? If you please, sir, I'm very fond of flowers. And is that why you would place tables and chairs upon them and have people walking over them with heavy boots? It wouldn't hurt them, sir. They wouldn't crush and wither, if you please, sir. It would just be pictures of what was very pretty and pleasant, and I should fancy that— Aye, that's it. You mustn't fancy, said the gentleman, quite elated by coming so happily to his point. That's it. You must never fancy. You are not Cecilia Jupe, said Mr. Gradgrind, to do anything of the kind. Fact, 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 said the gentleman, and fact, 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 repeated Mr. Gradgrind. You are to be in all things regulated and governed, said the gentleman, by fact. We hope to have before long a board of fact, composed of commissioners of fact, who will force the people to become a people of fact and of nothing but fact. You must discard the word fancy altogether. You will have nothing to do with it. You must not have in any object of use or ornament what would be a contradiction, in fact. You don't walk upon flowers. In fact, you must not be allowed to walk upon flowers in carpets. You don't find that foreign birds and butterflies come and perch upon your crockery. You cannot be allowed to paint foreign birds and butterflies upon your crockery. You never meet with quadrupeds going up and down walls. You must not be allowed to have quadrupeds represented upon walls. You must see, for all these purposes, combinations and modifications in primary colors of mathematical figures which are susceptible of proof and demonstration. This is the new discovery. This is fact. This is taste. The little girl curtsied and sat down. She was very young, and she looked somewhat frightened by the matter-of-fact prospect the world afforded. And that is a scene from the chapter called Murdering the Innocents from Hard
Oh,
Times.
Peter, I love it. I just love it. So how does it feel performing it all these years later?
it's quite literally been 38 years since I since I performed that piece. But I performed it a lot in the Boston area in over 2 years, so it became a little bit like muscle memory.
Peter, you just one man word for wordized it. It's incredible. Really, really, really
Is
wonderful.
he hired?
Joanne wrote me a note saying we didn't hire this guy.
So, Susan, have you done any Dickens?
You know, we've done it in workshops. I know that, but it's, you know, we're dedicated to the short story.
Right.
And so, and we don't adapt, you know, currently that's our position. But of course, there's the famous RSC story, you know, that do you know this? They were really having financial troubles. And the way I heard it is they made a decision they could either do a bunch of little two-handers or they could do something with a lot of people, one shot. And that's when they did Nicholas Nickleby in a very word for word style. You know, I mean, that was before us actually, but of course they adapted that. But yeah, I mean, Dickens is just, yeah. Could I mention to you something else that we will be doing? I just want to make sure I get it in here.
Yes,
Is
of course.
this okay? Yeah, we will be performing live on the radio, Langston Hughes, The Blues I'm Playing, this Thursday at 1:00 on KALW.
Oh, well, that is fabulous.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt the flow here, but I want to make sure we.
Good to know. And we love KALW. Thank you.
1 p.m. Thursday. The great Langston Hughes.
Braves are coming in. They are oh, your mother. I see your mother. No,
Peter, that was amazing. Really.
Braves are coming in, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. You know, we cook these things up, and it's just extraordinary.
Thank you to Brian for unmuting me. No, it's a lot of fun to do, but it's partly Dickens because he really, while I made edits and, you know, elisions, I didn't insert anything. I didn't add any words. I removed some description of like the boy Bitzer and so forth, but it's partly because he brought this innate theatricality to the characters, which is why you've seen so many wonderful, wonderful adaptations, including that amazing 8-hour, Royal Shakespeare Company adaptation of Nicholas Nickleby that was just extraordinary.
It's, you just want to keep watching and watching. His characters are so rich and beautiful.
I'll tell you one thing that is different about reading it now, 38 years on. When I first came upon it, we all knew that it was like an embarrassment to think of education as being only about facts, and that fancy was in fact the lifeblood of the imagination. But now in the world that we're in, there's part of me that thinks like maybe we should have a board of fact composed of commissioners of fact. Because
excellent idea. Well, I want to give you time to bask in your glory, but we're running out of time. So I'm just going to pose one more question. Often we read a book and we say that should be a movie or that should get a theatrical performance. Do either of you have any of those, that something you've read where you think, wow, we really should, somebody should make that?
Well, Barbara, you and I just read in our book club a book by Olga Tokarczuk, the recent Nobel winner, called, what was it called? Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead.
Yes.
A really painful title. The whole time I was reading it, I thought, oh, this is extraordinary. This is going to make an amazing movie. Somebody needs to make it. And then we found out that in fact it had been made apparently as a very poor movie by a great director named Agnieszka Holland. So somebody needs to remake that. But that was a recent reading experience where the whole time through I thought this is going to be a fabulous film. But apparently
I will offer up The Winter Soldier by Daniel Mason, which is just a fabulous novel, and a lot of it takes place in a bitterly cold field hospital in Russia. And I can just see it, and I know who I would have play the roles. And you know, just somebody needs to do it. It's not going to be me, but I would be happy to be a consultant on the project.
Oh.
Susan, do you have any that you'd like to see brought to stage or film?
Oh, well, I'm deep into Colson Whitehead right now. And I'm reading The Nickel Boys, which just won the Pulitzer.
So painful.
Extremely painful, but such an important and great piece of writing, as is the Underground Railroad,
Yes.
yes.
Absolutely.
Also. Barb, can I make a correction? I'm so sorry. I know we're running out of time. I told you we're doing Langston Hughes this Thursday. It's next Thursday.
So your partner is texting you madly saying
you better believe it. Thank God, Joanne. Yay. Yes, she is. I'm so, excited to be here that I'm excited to do that story. I thought it was like, it's Thursday, but it's next week.
So
June 18th.
A week from Thursday at KALW,
Thank
1
you.
p.m.
Thank you.
And tell us again what the performance is.
It's Langston Hughes, The Blues I'm Playing. And It's a great story set during the time of the Harlem Renaissance.
Excellent. Peter, do you have anything you'd like to promote as we go out?
Sure. I mean, I mentioned it before, but the festival that I help program, Frameline, is having its Pride Showcase, this mini 4 days of LGBTQ film. A lot of world premieres. This isn't just, raiding the archive. These are a lot of new films, and it's going to be Thursday the 25th through Sunday the 28th, and everything's at frameline.org, and tickets go on sale tomorrow. So that's on the sort of professional film side.
Well, thanks so much to both of you for being here tonight. This was great fun. Peter, I think you need to put together another performance because your fans are going to be clamoring.
Yes.
And we will look forward to hearing from Word for Word on KLW. And also, podcasts are a great idea, Susan. I mean, it lends itself so well to the podcast form. So yay. And I see Joanne is very happy to have tuned in tonight. Thanks to all of the Marsh audience and to Stephanie, and have a wonderful evening. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Brian. Bye, Brianna. Bye, Stephanie.
Bye, Peter. Bye, Susan. Bye, Barbara. Well, thank you all. What a wonderful show with this drama, the drama focus. We really appreciate it. I think, Brian, we have a little tip jar video? Dramatic, of course, very dramatic. He's going to put that on, and then I'll be back to say goodbye.
Hey, folks, I hope you're enjoying tonight's performances, and there's still more to come. All presented by The Marsh, a San Francisco institution for 30 years. If you love the arts, and especially The Marsh, I'm asking you to visit our website at themarsh.org and make a tax-deductible contribution to help keep this unique San Francisco establishment open. On our website, you'll see the tip jar. It's easy to click on and contribute, and it's all tax-deductible. On our website, you'll also see up-and-coming events and links to our famous Marsh Youth Theater, which has been working with children from San Francisco for years. You'll also see how to donate to our 30th birthday fund. And feel free to sign up for our newsletter. We'll keep you in the loop on all the great up-and-coming events. Again, themarsh.org. Any contribution will help keep this San Francisco institution alive. Thank you in advance for your loyalty and your support.
Well, isn't that wonderful? Somebody made it for us. What do you think? You can tell us in the chat room, or you can tell us by making or taking back your tips. Anyway, thank you so much for coming tonight. There's another thing we want to do. Sign up for, we have our YouTube channel. And every time there's a show, you'll get a little notice that it's on. We stream these live on YouTube and Zoom each night. And we show all these shows. You can look at all our past shows and see all our shows on our website and through the Marsh stream. So yeah, come back tomorrow night for Solo Arts Heals and learn how to get beyond your addiction with me, Irma Herrera, on Thursday, Bingo with Josh, David Harada on Saturday, Monday night, and Tuesday night. Next Tuesday, we have, what is next Tuesday? Is it our sing-along? I can't remember, but come on back, join us at Marsh Stream, be healthy, be happy. It's such a time. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great time. Bye.